From VOA, Learning English, this is the Science Report. The amount of fish being caught worldwide is much larger than has been reported. And that could mean serious problems for the environment and nations that depend on fisheries. A new estimate places the world fish catch at 109 million metric tons. That is 32 million tons higher than the yearly totals governments have been reporting. The same report notes that the world's fish catch has been shrinking since the late 1990s. Countries report their industrial catches to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. But they do not report other kinds of fishing. This includes that fishing done for recreation and individual food, and the catches of small commercial fisheries, known as artisanal fisheries. Daniel Pauly of the University of British Columbia led the study. He noted that a large percentage of the world's fish catch is thrown away. He told VOA that better estimates of the actual global catch will help ensure there will be enough fish in the future. He added that fish catches have been decreasing since 1996. The researchers also found ways that the world's fisheries are changing. It found that fishing fleets of larger nations are catching fish in the waters of developing countries more and more. Daniel Pauly said he was surprised by the amount of fishing done by foreigners in competition with local fishers. He said many European and Asian fishing boats are operating in waters off the coast of West Africa, for example. The online journal Nature Communications published the findings. For VOA, Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans. From VOA, Learning English, this is the Health Report. Even in the world of medicine, what is old is new again. Thousands of years ago, Egyptians used copper to sterilize drinking water. They knew copper could destroy bacteria in the water. Ancient Romans, Aztecs, and Greeks used forms of it for medical treatments. Copper may kill many organisms on contact. Now it is back in hospitals to do just that. Bill Keevil is a microbiologist at Southampton University in Britain. He is investigating the properties of copper. He has been investigating how the metal can kill germs, or pathogens, as researchers call them. Keevil points to studies of infection rates at U.S. hospitals that use copper surfaces and hospitals that do not. He says the studies found that surfaces made of copper alloys produced a 58% reduction in infection rates. The findings were published in the journal MBio. Keevil and his research team found that copper surfaces can quickly kill the coronavirus 229E. The coronavirus is responsible for the common cold and pneumonia. This virus is also closely related to the pathogen that causes SARS and MERS, two sometimes deadly diseases. Keevil says that electrically charged copper molecules, or ions, can kill these viruses. He says they do this by destroying their genetic material. As a result, the genetic material in the coronavirus 229E cells cannot change or mutate. Keevil calls the chemistry that does this fantastic. Bill Keevil says copper can also save hospitals money by reducing the number of infections. He says their other costs of fighting infection will drop, including those for drug treatments. For VOA Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. A United Nations study says almost 24 million children around the world are unable to attend school because of conflict. The United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, studied 22 countries affected by conflict. The UN agency found that nearly 1 in 4 of the more than 109 million kids of primary and lower secondary school age who live in conflict zones are missing out on their education. Lisa Bender is an education specialist with UNICEF. She says not only are more children affected by conflict, but conflicts are lasting longer. She adds that children are missing important years for learning. The results, Bender says, are that children are not able to get the skills they need to survive. These include both day-to-day living skills and long-term skills needed to become future teachers, doctors, and leaders. If children grow up without these skills, Bender says, countries suffer in the long term. Economies and public health could worsen, while girls become more vulnerable to sex abuse. Conflicts are fueling huge population movements in some areas, including the Middle East. Syria is the country largely driving Europe's migrant and refugee crisis. Lisa Bender says Syria once had most of its boys and girls in school. Now, she says, it is difficult to get information. UNICEF says in South Sudan, over half of the children, 51%, are out of school. Niger and Sudan are also near the top of the list. UNICEF says Afghanistan has made progress, but 40% of its children still are out of school. For VOA Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Russia's economy is struggling at the beginning of 2016. Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev thinks the economy is looking better than it did 1 year ago. But he told a conference in January that Russia must prepare for the worst. Medvedev spoke in Moscow at the yearly Guider Forum on economics. He said 2015 was probably the most difficult year for Russia economically in the past 10 years. The level of economic activity shrank 3.8% last year. Two main reasons for this were the sharp drop in the price of oil and Western economic sanctions. Oil is Russia's main export. Its price has dropped about 70% to $30 a barrel over the past 12 months. Western countries placed sanctions on Russia because of its 2014 takeover of Crimea. Russia also has continued its military support for rebels in eastern Ukraine. The Western measures have cut off Russian banks from international credit. The value of the ruble has dropped from a high of 30 to the US dollar to about 75. Inflation was a major concern for Russians last year. On average, prices increased at a rate of 15% in 2015. But consumer food prices increased between 20 and 30%. High inflation has hurt Russia's poor. The number of Russians below subsistence poverty rose to more than 20 million last year from 18 million a year earlier. Medvedev admitted the government would likely face budget cuts. About half of Russia's budget depends on oil export revenues. Observers say oil prices could drop further to $20 a barrel. For VOA Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans.